Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast, celebrating the tracks by a musical pioneer.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Electric Friends with me, Tom Eames, and today we have a new interview special for you, and I'm really pleased and excited to say it's with none other than Gary Numan's brother, John Webb, aka Donovan Silver. I must be honest and say that although I knew Donovan had been a part of Gary's band in the past and had appeared on a number of his records, I didn't quite realise just for how long he had been. Having read Gary's books and seen him post on social media about his brother, Gary has always been incredibly proud of Donovan and to be his older brother, and he often supports and posts updates about Donovan's music. As Gary explained in his autobiography,
"When I was 7, my dad's brother John died. I remember seeing my dad cry for just a brief moment, something I'd not seen before and have never seen again. Soon after that, John's children were sent out to various family members to look after, and one of them, Donovan, came to us. I can't truly remember the ins and outs of what went on back then, but Donovan was in a sorry condition when he came to us, so my mum and dad decided to adopt him. It took a while, but eventually Donovan became John, and John became my brother, whom I have loved with all my heart from the day he arrived. I've heard so many comments over the years about how I must have been jealous of a new baby coming into the family, or how I must have resented him, going from being an only child to having a baby brother. I never had any of those feelings, not one, ever."
Donovan would go on to perform punk as Johnny Silver and would support Tubeway Army as a young kid, and even contributed to Gary's early albums. And when he was a bit older, he would join up with Gary's band and would remain part of the setup throughout the 80s. In the middle of all that, like Gary, he would become a pilot and go on to have an incredible aviation career. And in recent years, he has returned to music as Donovan Silver, creating some excellent atmospheric electronica. So we discuss all of this and more in the interview, so I hope you enjoy it every bit as much as I did. So I'll speak to you at the end, but for now, here's John Webb, aka Donovan Silver. Hi Donovan, thanks so much for being on Electric Friends.
My pleasure.
So obviously the podcast is all about Gary Numan and his career, so it's a real privilege to speak to you today. So firstly, it makes sense to go right back to the beginning and just, reading Gary's autobiography again. He writes about how you and he obviously grew up together and how he said he loves his brother with all my heart since the day he arrived. So what were your earliest memories as a kid, and what was Gary like as an older brother growing up in Middlesex and wherever else you lived as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, we were very close. Obviously, there's a 7-year age gap, so that sort of makes a little bit of a difference. So, I mean, obviously, my younger years when I sort of turned up, I'm not really sure, what was going on. But as I grew up, Gary was just always there, very protective, very loving, just always there, really. It's so. As far as I know, we grew up as people do, as siblings do. We did a lot of things together, a lot of family things, obviously, at that age, holidays and, all that usual sort of stuff. Gary's obviously always into his music. When he was, as I grew up, he was either reading books, which he always had his head in a book, pretty much every time he went in the room. Either that or he was doing music. They were his two massive passions, sort of growing up, really. Yeah. I think we had a normal childhood together.
Yeah. And so both of you found an interest in music at a young age. So when did you first start playing around with songs, and what were you both listening to when you were growing up?
Well, I probably started. I mean, I wrote stuff in the early Tubeway Army days. I wrote this song "Lucky." And that was probably my first thing I wrote myself. But prior to that, obviously I grew up with Gary's music interests a lot. Bebop Deluxe, Bowie, T-Rex, all those sort of bands. Mum and Dad were very much into country and western. So I had Jim Reeves and all that sort of going on as well. And then me, I sort of liked more the rock and roll sort of element, really.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a sort of mixed bag, really, musically around the house. So there's influences of all of it, I think.
And so, yeah, you mentioned it. So were you about 12 years old? Is that right? When you'd perform on stage with Tubeway Army in the early days? Is that how it went down?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. 77. Yeah. Well, yeah, 12.
Wow. I mean, that must have been an amazing experience, being able to do that kind of thing.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
The gigs I did were the Roxy Club in London. I think I went on either 3 or 4 times. I can't remember now. And it was great. It was, I wrote the song. Gary put the music to the words I'd done and the riff I did, and it was the mid song of the Tubeway Army set. So I used to come out of the dressing room with all my hair sprayed silver, leather jacket on, punk pins in and all that sort of stuff. Jump on the stage, yell my head off, and then jump off again. But for me, the Tubeway Army at that time was obviously Gary. It was my uncle Gerald on drums and Paul Gardner. So it was really a family unit. And my dad used to lump all the PA in and out and all that sort of stuff. So we're always together, sort of thing.
Well, it must be quite a debut then for you to be going to a venue like that. And apparently I've read somewhere that you'd get like the biggest cheer of the night. And it must have been, it set you forward on that sort of musical path, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. It's, when you stand up in front of a crowd like that, there's a buzz. And once you get that in your system, you never get rid of it, really. It's always there. The place was always packed, and the atmosphere was quite an amazing thing. And as a 12-year-old, you can't imagine anything like that, really.
It's amazing. Well, so when Tubeway Army first started picking up steam, when was it clear that Gary's music and everything was starting to turn into something special and not just another punk band? This was going somewhere.
I think it's like any of these things. The more gigs you do, people get to hear your name, hear the music. There's the word spreads about you. So I think there was a underlying people talking about this new band, Tubeway Army. And then also you start getting record company interest and things like that. And that's really when you sort of get a big change once a record company sort of gets involved. So I think that was the big thing, really.
Yeah. And how did it feel for you when Gary essentially became like an overnight star almost, when he went on Old Grey Whistle Test and Top of the Pops, and that fame went to another level? So I think I've read in his book, it was quite a tough time for you at school at times. But was it such?
Yeah, it was. I mean, Gary had always said he would be famous. And as his younger brother, I never doubted him.
Yeah.
I grew up believing that's what he'd be, because that's what he told me. So when he was suddenly number one and we were going to Top of the Pops, and I was standing in a little crowd down the front, being herded around by the cameras, watching them do Our Friends Electric, it seemed perfectly normal to me. That seemed, Gary had always said that's what was going to happen. It was happening. Therefore, that's what's being expected. So for me, I thought it was quite natural. I hadn't realised at that point that very few people get to do that sort of thing, and I just thought that, as Gary said it, that will happen. With schooling, usual thing, there's a bit of jealousy, there's a bit of nastiness, there's a bit of everything, really, because he wore makeup and all that sort of stuff, because he was different from everyone else. Everyone else was into ELO and all that sort of thing at the time. I got a bit of bullying and a bit of stuff at school, and it wasn't pleasant. It did make those sort of years difficult. And you're in those years. I was 14, I think, at the time. you're in those years where you're formulating yourself who you're going to become. And you almost have your own identity, if you like, taken away, because everyone has to refer to you as Gary's brother as opposed as to John Webb sort of thing.
Yeah.
So at that age, that was quite hard to deal with. I was struggling to know who I was going to become as me, but people weren't using my name, and it got very confusing and everything. And for me, what got me through that period more than anything else was the fact I started drumming. And for my mental health, as much as anything else, drumming was absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me. I would always consider myself a drummer more than anything else because that's where I started. Gerald had given me my early lessons in drumming, which had been absolutely fantastic. And in fact, Gerald used to, when I started auditioning for bands as a drummer, Gerald used to come with me and lug all my gear in and out and sort of sit for all the auditions and that sort of thing. So he was very supportive, Gerald. So I think there was a lot of anxiety in me through those sort of teen years with the bullying and everything else going on. So without the drums, I don't think I would have got through it properly. But then, things changed. We decided as a family to take me out of school for a while, thinking that all the, hype around Gary would die down after a year or so, which it didn't. So the idea was come out of school for a year and then go to college and finish off my education. But other things got in the way between that happening, really. So I did come out of school for a year. I worked within the family company and all that sort of thing. And then Gary was going to go on tour in 82 in America. And because of the drumming, I was going to go as Chris Slade's drum tech. So I was going to, I'd be out with the crew, setting Chris's stuff up and all that, which was, would have been absolutely ideal for me. But then I'm not quite sure how it happened. Gary was a keyboard player short. I knew all the songs because I'd been there when most of them had been written. So I suddenly got elevated from drum tech to keyboard player. And I'm still not sure to this day exactly how that happened, but I'm very pleased it did. So, at 17, I was, thrust into this, big band in America rehearsing.
Wow.
Quite a big thing, really.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so were you part of Gary's band essentially in recording sessions quite early on? What were your first kind of appearances on his music in credits?
I was there for a lot of the sessions during all the albums, really, in the early days. It varied, to be honest. I didn't really have a huge musical contribution in those days. Used to do a lot of hand claps and a little bit of percussion stuff here and there. But really, I was just there and was a part of hearing how things evolved and how they became what they became. So I probably had a working knowledge of all the early albums. Not actually physically being involved, but just there and seeing how the process went. In the early days, pretty much everything was Gary. And in later days, we got people like Chris Payne and people like that involved. You get their inputs as well as professional musicians, so you start seeing different things come in as well.
And so was it the Warriors tour that you took over the second keyboard duties? Was that the period?
No, it was the Ice Assassin tour in 1982, which is we only toured in America. So that was a completely different band that we'd had before. That was Chris Play, Pino Palladino, Roger Mason, and Rob Dean. So Gary hadn't played live with any of them before. They hadn't worked as a band unit before. It wasn't without its issues, that tour, or issues within the band, actually. So it wasn't, I would say, the happiest of times. It was a huge grounding for me and a huge learning curve to work within them, but also to learn everything I had to learn. Roger wasn't much of a help to me, so it was lots of studying on my own, really. So I was, in a way, I was quite thankful when we then came back to the UK in '83, and we got the original touring band back, minus Paul, of course. So I was delighted because, since '79, they were like other brothers, really. When I went to see Gary in '79 for the very first time, as soon as I walked in, Chris Payne grabbed me, took me up the keyboard tower and was showing me all around the set and everything. Little did we know, 4 years later, we would actually be working together.
Yeah.
So it was quite bizarre, really.
Yeah. I mean, what was your fondest memory in terms of the touring aspect of it? Was there a particular tour or period that was like, this was a really good one? That one?
Well, they've all got elements, really, which are, the '82 tour in America, one of the weirdest things is we played on the Mississippi Steamboat.
Wow.
We're on the stage. As we come on the stage, it leaves the moorings, goes up and down the Mississippi, and moors up as we finish. That was weird, to say the least. So things like that. Hammersmith Odeon, on that first 83 tour, they used to, in those days, have a fire curtain between the stage and the audience, and literally you couldn't hear a thing when it was down. And I can remember the first night we played there. We're all on stage, we're chatting and everything else. The intro music starts, and it's silent apart from the music, of course. And then as the screen starts going up, there's this huge roar of sound, which is the audience. And as the screen goes up, it just got louder and louder. And it was like a wall of sound coming back at us. I will never, ever forget the first time back, because that was, that's just one of those things. You just say, what the hell is this? The others had experienced that sort of thing before, but I hadn't. We didn't have that in '82, that's for sure. And it was just incredible, absolutely incredible. Every tour had its good bits, really.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, one of my favourite stories, actually, it's before this, I think, but in Gary's book was when he talked about how Queen kind of took him under his wing for a while and were really kind to him. And he said that Roger Taylor came to him to one of your gigs with your band was Accent.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, what was that whole story like? Did you get to meet Roger and all that?
I spent a lot of time with Roger. My first gig was in a pub called the Airman, strangely enough, Belton, with Accent. So Gary was doing Dance at that time, the album, and Roger was going to be doing some drums and that on it. And he was at the studio with Gary that day, but his drum kit hadn't arrived yet. It was on his way, but wasn't there. Anyway, so both Gary and Roger came to that gig. So not only did I have my brother there, but then I had Roger Taylor there, who one of the best drummers in the world. So it's pretty incredible, really. But the amazing thing about that is afterwards, Gary and Roger were going back to the studio, and Gary said, "Well, Roger's kit hadn't arrived yet." So basically, cut a long story short, I packed my kit up, took my kit back to the studios, we set it up, and Roger played my kit. I think it was the song Crash he played it on. But anyway, they played through the night, basically, and that was recorded that night. So that was using my kit. A couple of days later or so, Roger's kit turned up, and that was set up in the corner in Rock City. And I was in to pick mine up, and Roger was there, and he said, should you have a little play?
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah. So I started playing, he started playing, and he'd say, add this, and I'd add this, and we spent a few hours just ribbing together. And he gave me a lot of talk about, setting the kit up and where things are and how he does his and all that sort of stuff. So he was always, very forthcoming with, information and techniques and ideas and things like that, Roger. I was very, very fortunate to be invited to go and see Queen at Wembley by him, which was... one of those outstanding gigs that you're so glad you got to go. So yeah, brilliant. He was always a brilliant bloke. I can even remember one day, we had a break in the recording. Then we had a fish and chip run down to Staines, which is about 20 minutes away. Rod said, "Come on in." So we all dived into his Aston Martin, which was a soft top. So we took the top down, we all jumped in the back, and we went up the fish and chip shop.
Oh, amazing.
So it's just little things like that.
Yeah.
But he was a great person. I really enjoyed spending time with him and sort of learning from him. So yeah, very, very lucky, really.
Yeah, I bet. Well, a few years after that, you also released your solo single, "The Experiment of Love," on the Numan label. I just wanted to hear a bit about the making of that song, really, as well.
Yeah, I think because Numan had started and various other acts were coming in and all that, I got the chance to work on some of my own ideas and songs, and that's the one that sort of came out as the best of the bunch, if you like. I don't think we'd initially decided to even release it. It's just that I got the chance to go in the studio sort of at 1 o'clock in the morning and work through the night, a few times, and that's what we came up with. Karen Taylor very kindly come and did the vocals, and Pat Kyle did the saxophone on it. So it was, it just came together really, and then it was decided, let's release that and see how it goes really. So again, I was lucky, really, at the right place, right time, as most things are. So I was very fortunate. I don't think we sold many, but but it was great to have done. It's a song I'm quite proud of.
So when was it that you decided to take a step back from music and focus on your aviation career? And if you could give listeners like a brief history of your really impressive flying career. I've read that you've been an airline captain, fleet manager, air display pilot. So yeah, I'd love to hear all about that.
Yeah, I've done a lot.
Yeah.
I started flying in '82, and that's purely down to Gary. He wanted my dad to learn to fly. My dad wasn't interested, so he paid for me to learn to fly instead. So I learned to fly in March, April, May time of '82. And literally, the day I got my license, the following day I jumped on the 747 and went to America to join the band. And that's sort of how that happened, really. So I had a pilot's license 6 months before I had my driving license.
Wow.
So I went off to America, came back, picked up where I left off, really, and I just wanted to fly a light aircraft. You know, that's who at 17 wouldn't want to fly a light aircraft. Yeah, it's fantastic. But from that, I got into some friends that were doing aerobatics and stuff, aerobatic competitions, and I thought, oh, God, that's quite interesting. So I sort of went in that area with flying, and then some of the guys were flying instructors, which you could do without being a commercial pilot in those days. I think the rules have changed now. And I thought, God, that's wow, being an instructor, God. Anyway, I was persuaded to give it a go by the chief flying instructor where I learned to fly. He said, yeah, you could do that. So I did. And I got qualified as a flying instructor. And I thought, well, what do I do with it? Now, Gary at that time was only sort of touring 2 months a year at the most. The other time when albums were being done, I could be around, but I wasn't always needed. So they offered me a job part-time. I could leave whenever I wanted to go off doing stuff with Gary. But the rest of the time I could work as a flying instructor. So most of the mid-'80s, that's what I did. I worked as a flying instructor, absolutely loved it. I had the best of both worlds. You know, I was flying aeroplanes, you know, most of the year round, and I was touring and playing music when I wasn't doing that. So it was the perfect period in my life, really. At the same time, I bought a Tiger Moth, 1939 Tiger Moth, which I absolutely loved. And some friends of mine were setting up a little display team, just a little thing but they were going to be ambitious. They wanted to have 9 Tiger Moths, flying like a Diamond 9, like the Red Arrows, but not doing aerobatics, just, you know, nice flying. So I got involved with them as well, and I learned formation flying and all that sort of stuff with them. So I was doing that at weekends as well. That then led on to other display things sort of later on. But while I was instructing, one of the other instructors went off and did his commercial pilot's licenses. And I just thought, I could probably do that. I was always pushing myself. So I did. I signed up for a course. Now, bear in mind, when I left school at 15, I had no qualifications. So I went off and did all these commercial licenses. And the mathematics was, I hadn't seen anything like it. So I spent more of my time learning how to do maths than I did actually doing the exams, because the maths was all new to me, and there was a lot of it. So I went and studied at Oxford, Oxford Air Training School, it was in those days. And after about a year, I came out with a commercial license. And that's really when I sort of had to decide what I was going to do. Gary still wasn't touring much a year. The flight instruction was brilliant. It didn't pay a lot. And I wanted to get a house and get on the ladder and all the stuff you do in life. So I looked around, and I didn't want to fly like a glass cockpit airliner or anything like that, because they didn't really interest me at that time. I was still very much into vintage aeroplanes and old aeroplanes. But there was a company called Baltic Airlines, which eventually merged into British Airferries. But they were down at Southend, and they had Viscounts, 4-engine Viscounts. And an airshow friend of ours, Pete Treadaway, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, he was one of their captains. And he said, go for an interview. So I got an interview with the chief pilot. I went down there and we talked, and as you do, and he told me all about the job and all that. It was just, I was sold on it the minute I got there, to be honest. And then Peter happened to be in the office, and he said, "Do you know Peter?" I said, "Yes, I do, from the air shows." He said, "Ah." And then he just leaned across and said, "When do you want to start?" And that was like, "Oh, okay." So July the 4th, 1988 is when I started. Independence Day, I'll always remember it.
Yeah.
So that's when I left the band, really left Gary's band officially.
Right. Yeah.
At that point in 88, because I didn't think that I'd be able to incorporate the flying and the music together. But it was quite obvious after a couple of years that Gary was still not touring that much. The airline summer was full on, winter was quiet. It was sort of charter type flying. So it lent itself to me taking a month off, 6 weeks off every winter to go and play in the band. So the opportunity came up, can't remember, it was about 91. So the opportunity came up then to go back to Gary's band for a few years, which I took. But during all this as well, I was doing more display flying. For a short period, Gary and I got to fly together in a Harvard formation team. I flew the Beech 18, which is a twin-engine aeroplane, as the lead ship with 4 Harvards, one of which was Gary. And Gary choreographed, a really good routine where we all interacted with each other, and I did a little solo while Gary was climbing for height to do his aerobatics and all that sort of stuff. So that was just brilliant. It's to do formation flying and do aerobatics, you have to trust people around you. You can't trust anyone better than your brother. So for both of us, it worked out perfectly, really. But while I was flying that, there's very few people at that time that was flying twin-engine tailwheel airplanes. So a company up at Duxford had a Beech 18, but they also had a Blenheim, which is due to fly in about a year or so's time, and various other things. So they asked me up there to fly, and I started flying their Beech 18, their Harvard. And I eventually went on to fly for them for many, many years. I flew to Blenheim for a long time. Absolutely beautiful airplane. Absolutely, I loved that airplane more than I could ever say. I got to fly the Spitfire. I did a couple of seasons on the Spitfire. I got to fly Lysander, Avro 504. Lots of beautiful airplanes that they had in their collection and part of what they worked on. So I was very lucky. Again, I'm very privileged to sort of you get to fly any of those, let alone display them. So that was another side that was going on alongside the job and alongside the music. And then I came back to Gary's band. I think it was 91. And that was till about 94, I think it was. And then it's when I came back, things were all a little bit different. I'd been away. Things had changed while I'd been away. The band was a little bit different. And the flying was getting a little bit more serious, if you like, in the fact that I was now a senior first officer being looked at to be a captain. So when I put everything in the mixing pot together, it seemed the right time. Gary wanted to sort of relaunch his career and do more touring and stuff like that. I didn't think I'd be able to fit the two in anymore as that grew, which is what did happen. So it seemed the right time to dip out again and, go my own way sort of thing. Yeah. So that's what I did. That was the point at which I dipped out permanently. And I think a year or so after that, I was moved to the left seat. And in the airline, I'd started on the Viscount as a first officer. They'd got back 111 jets in the early 90s, which they'd moved me on to as a first officer. So when I took my command, they moved me back to the Viscount, which at that point was primarily doing night freight, really, for parcel force. But brilliant. It was like going back to an old friend, because that's where I'd started. But now I've gone back as a captain. So I did a couple of years there, then back onto the 111 jet as captain, and then back to the Viscount again, this time to be a training captain. So training people online and that sort of thing. And then back to the 111, the same thing, training people. And then towards the end of the 90s, the company was going to buy 737s to replace the old back 111. And they needed, obviously, pilots, but they needed management, that sort of thing. So I was about number 7 seniority in the company at that time, so I was quite high up. But there's people more experienced and better qualified than me, if I'm honest. But they asked me to apply for the fleet manager job of the Boeing, which I got. But I'd never flown one at that point at all. So I spent the next 6 months training with British Midland, British Airways, and another company which I can't remember, all their different ways of operating the same aeroplane and their different training techniques and all that. So for 6 months, I had stuff coming in from all sorts, because everyone did a different way. And from that, I started writing our manuals, how we would operate the aeroplane. During that time, I also did my own training course on it, so I was qualified on it. But I wrote all the manuals for the company, for the aeroplane and everything. The operating procedures, the day-to-day stuff that we had to do. The training program for new pilots and all that sort of thing. Then I selected the pilots off the 111 who had come on it initially, because initially we just had one aeroplane. I think when I eventually left, I think we had 4. But during that time, I also got checked out by the Civil Aviation Authority, by one of their test pilots, to do air tests on the Boeing. So each Boeing we got, I did the air test on as well, which is great, because it involves, you shut the engine down, you do what you do in the simulator, but you do it on a real aeroplane. No passengers on it. So again, that was a great qualification to have, and great things to have. So that was very exciting. I loved every minute of setting that up. It was hard work, but very rewarding. And one of the companies we didn't have enough, because we only had the one aeroplane. When we wanted more pilots trained up, we didn't really have enough sort of flying hours and things to get our pilots trained. So there was an airline standstill called Go, and they needed pilots. So we came to a deal where they would train some of our pilots up, and they would work for them for a while until we were ready to have them back. So we had quite a good working relationship. To the extent that they headhunted me and said, would you like to join? So I did, basically. So after 15 years at BAF, which became British World Airlines, I left and joined Go. And I just went in as a line captain initially. But obviously I got promoted up quite quickly to simulator instructor, which is what I was qualified to be. And I have to be honest, I thought that that's where I would still be to this day. They had plans to build a simulator centre, training centre at Stansted. A few of us have been earmarked to help run that centre. And to me, I thought that was my future in aviation, was training pilots in the sim, and that was my life sorted out. Unfortunately, EasyJet came along and sort of behind closed doors bought out Go, really, through Go was financed through a sort of finance company, and EasyJet come along and paid over the top, basically to get rid of their competition. Because at that point, I think only one of them could have survived. Without a doubt, Go was the better airline, better established airline. But EasyJet were a bit more clever and come out and pull the rug from under their feet. So overnight, we went from 15 aeroplanes, where we were, to about 30 odd. And then after that, they just went on to a mad sort of expansion plan, really. I never felt happy at Go, if I'm quite at EasyJet, if I'm quite honest. I never liked the way that they took over, got rid of Go. So I was never a happy person there. I stayed, really up to my mum passed away. And then that was it, really. That was the time to get out. In that time, obviously I stayed on the Boeing teaching. And then when they got rid of the Boeings, they got Airbuses in. But because I was a bit anti, I didn't train on the Airbus. I just went back to being a captain, which is nothing wrong with that at all. I love it a minute, but I just didn't want to go through all the hassle again of training anymore. So I sort of took a little bit of a back step, really. But that was more because I didn't like them more than anything else. Not necessarily a good career move.
Well, that was a fascinating story. I can't think of many in the early days any top ranking pilots who also in their downtime being in a proper rock band as well. So it's just it must have been an amazing time. And so when was it you decided to return to music as well and start recording under the name Donovan Silver as well?
Well, music's always been there. I don't think you ever get rid of it.
No.
But I hadn't really sort of done anything serious or kept in practice, really. I hadn't touched the saxophone since '94. It's sat in the corner and it's collected dust for a very long time. It was really, I sort of 2012, just after I started thinking about coming back to music. And then, 2015, I got divorced, or started getting divorced, because it always takes longer than it should. 2016, my mum passed away. And that was it, really. That was sort of like, what am I doing everything for? Why am I doing the job I do to make a nice life for people, and now they've gone? Plus my mum was just best friend. So I started to think, right, what do I want to get out of it? So really, that's when I started to really come back to music properly. Partly a way of dealing with my mum, really. And I know she would have been, sort of quite delighted. But it's started a little bit as a therapy, I suppose, in a way. But continued. The Silver, to explain the name, because not everyone understands the name, I don't think. Silver was when I used to do the Tubeway Army things. I called myself Johnny Silver. Yeah. Because Mum used to spray my hair silver. So that's why I took Silver back as part of the new name. And then Donovan is the name I was born with. So, before I was adopted, that was my name, Donovan Webb. So I wanted to go back to that, because that's the core. That's who I am. So that's how the name came about. So Donovan Silver was sort of born at that point, really. And I spent time, starting to write music and starting to work out ideas and trying to find a direction I wanted to take the music in, because I didn't really know what music I wanted to do. I knew it'd be electronic and and sequencers and stuff, but I didn't know what style I wanted it to be. So there was a lot of sort of trying to find what I thought was where I wanted to be and what I was going to do. So I did 5 EPs initially, sort of one a year from sort of 2018. They really were me trying to find myself and my sound, if you like. And whether I was going to do singing or not singing, better off not singing, I think was the decision. And they really led me to Alpha. And I think Alpha that's my sound. That Alpha is musically what I'm most proud of. And without a doubt that's where I want to be. The next album will be slightly different again, but Alpha is for me the best. If you want to say to someone, what's your music? That's the album. Any song off there, I'd play to someone and say that's what I do.
Yeah, and I think Alpha in particular is it's beautiful electronica, and I'll play a clip in the show. But for those who might not have heard your music yet, how would you describe it to newcomers?
Oh, that's difficult, isn't it?
Sorry, put you on the spot.
No, it's difficult to describe, isn't it? I mean, I would say it doesn't sound like anybody else. But someone listening to it might say, "Oh, yeah, there's a bit of this or there's a bit of that."
Yeah.
There will be a bit of all sorts in there. There's probably a bit of Kraftwerk in there, probably a bit of Depeche Mode, there's probably a bit of Gary in there somewhere. There's influences from everywhere that I've listened to music, over me 50 odd years. So to say a definite sound is quite difficult, I think. I mean, one of my great influences is Tangerine Dream. It's so if anyone was ever compare me to them, I'd be more than happy. I don't think, having been to see them recently, I don't think my music sounds anything like theirs. But there's an influence there.
Well, and also the artworks are always really striking, particularly on Alpha. I just wondered, is there a story in your head going along with all this, or is how do you go about writing different tracks?
Well, with Alpha, each track has got its own story, if you like. So rather than the album having a complete story, I mean, the cover of Alpha, which is like a sort of city on a planet far, far away, as they say, that is, well, you can see it's on the wall behind me. That was there all the time I was writing the album. So that was always the daily inspiration was that picture. So that is the idea for the whole album. But then each song on it, I had a separate picture which I put up on the computer screen next to me when I was working. And that's what I would use to fill that song. So like when I was writing Mercury, I had pictures of Mercury up, the planet. And I tried to imagine what it was like, going across that planet, what a journey across it would be like, that sort of thing. So each song I tried to do a musical story to it, if you like.
And so that... Sure, yeah. You've obviously found the whole experience as a form of therapy in a way. So how have you found performing live again? Has that been a completely another element to the experience?
It's been incredible, actually. Last year, I live in Whitby, up in North Yorkshire, and we have a new little electronic club called Wavelength. which is like experimental electronic music. And it only started early last year. And Chris Whitehead, who's one of the organisers, contacted me and said, would this be something you'd be interested in playing at? So I went along one night. It's on every 2 months. And it's very different from what I do, but it's still electronic. And I said, I'd love to, Chris. I said, but I haven't played for nearly 30 years. I said, I'm going to have to give it a bit of thought. So I did. I spent last summer thinking about it. And then I said, yes, I will. So I think it was September I played there. And it was great. I got a really good response. Lots of people came to see me. It was extremely nerve-wracking. I can remember on the first song, I looked down and my left hand was just shaking. Thought, you better play something, otherwise he's going to carry on doing it. So I knew the nerves were there, and I think they were, certainly the first 2 songs, extremely nervous, but then I sort of settled again. And then before you know it, you finished. So it did go quite quickly. Got a really good response. So it was 2 things really. One, playing live, and making sure I could play live, and everything worked how it used to work and that sort of thing. So that was a challenge before anyway, and it all worked perfectly well on the night, I'm glad to say. But also seeing people's reaction to the songs. I hadn't experienced really people listening to my songs, and their direct reaction. So that was quite a new element to it as well. So that all went superbly, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, well, I'd like to do it again. I'm okay at writing music and doing records. I haven't got the foggiest idea how to get gigs because I've never had to before. So I didn't know afterwards how to get more gigs, or how to go about it all. And then sort of towards the end of the year, Peter Steer from Tin Gun sort of contacted me and said that Littlefinger and themselves are going to do some gigs. Would I be interested in joining them? And I thought for about 2 seconds and I said, yes, absolutely. So we did a gig together in Camden earlier this year in February, which is sold out. And it was brilliant, absolutely fantastic. I did a very different sort of set there than I'd done in Whitby. But it was absolutely fantastic. Incredible night. So hopefully, there's no plans at the moment, but hopefully later in the year we'll get together and the 3 of us will go out and do some more gigs. I know Dave Brooks wants to do some up in Yorkshire, and I think Peter wants to do some more down south. So hopefully we might get up to Scotland. It'd be nice to do a few more. But the plans are to do more together. So that'd be good. I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully that'll all come together.
Amazing, that's very cool. Well, I had a few questions from listeners, and I was very quickly going through them, and I realised I've asked most so it's pointless going. But there was one question I did want to ask from Tony J, where it was, he said, I read somewhere that John came up with the intro to Me, I Disconnect From You. Is that right? So it'd just be interesting to hear that.
From memory, yes. I was writing on a piano at home, just playing, as you do. And I had those notes in a sequence a lot slower. So I was playing that riff much slower than it became. Gary walked in and heard it. Oh, yeah, I like that. So I got sped up and went into the song.
Yeah, amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Just a couple more questions then about Gary as well. So could we see you team up with Gary again in the future now that you're back making music? Is that something that you'd like to be able to do?
I would absolutely 100% love it. I mean, the chances to get to support Gary on a tour or something like that, or even do a guest spot, yes, I would absolutely love it. I'm not so sure that Gary and I share that enthusiasm. His music is very different from what I'm doing, so I'm not sure my music would fit in with what he does. And I'm not sure it would happen. If asked, yes, I would do it tomorrow. But I haven't been asked.
Well, it's great seeing him being so supportive, though, of your music. He often posts about your gigs and your new album and things like that. So that's really great to see.
Yeah, he's 100% supportive. You know, he's always has been. You know, he's always been supportive. So it's not because of that. It's just not sure musically.
Yeah.
You know, we complement each other.
Sure. And just how has it been following Gary's career over the years? Because particularly, well, as you say, you left the band in 94. So seeing that was kind of the exact year, I guess, that he changed his style and he's had that career upturn, which is still going on today. So how has it felt looking on and seeing him flourish again and going to places like Wembley and all this kind of thing?
It's just brilliant. You know, it's hard work and graft that's got him there. Dedication. You know, the music he's doing is brilliant. I think he's loving touring now more than he ever has done in his life. I think his voice is even better. I mean, the acoustic tour he did a few years ago, I think that's the best vocals I've ever heard from him, ever. Absolutely incredible. I absolutely love that tour. But everything he's done, you know, it's, you know, the new direction. It took a few years to get it how he wanted it and get it to gel and, you know, and play around with it. But now, you know, he's getting the results that he deserves with it. He's had some, you know, wonderful reaction. You know, for once the press have been nice to him, which is a rarity. You know, lots of bands are now sort of admitting that he was their inspiration and stuff when they were younger. So I think he's getting the rewards he deserves.
And now Raven's making music as well, so the family link is still going, which is great to see.
Yes, I mean Raven's new single is just absolutely fantastic. You know, a video, just everything about it is just absolutely brilliant, and it's her. You know, and that's how she is. Very proud of her. Very proud. You know, you can say that she's got it easy because of Gary and all that. She hasn't. You know, she's had to do the work. She's had to do the writing. You know, she's had to put her heart and soul into it, as everyone does. You know, and she's the one out there that, you know, people are looking at. So, you know, it's hopefully, I think it's a 3-single deal that she's on. And if that goes well, the record company will release the album. So, fingers crossed, they release the album.
It'd be silly not to.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the first single has just been phenomenal, and the next two just as good, if not better. So yes, if BMG are listening, release the album.
And obviously you mentioned your mum, and I just wanted to ask because it's clear from reading Gary's book and everything, just how important Beryl and Tony were in terms of his career, but also your career as well in your life. So I just wanted to just hear a little bit about just them and how important they have been over the years. Yeah,
well, I mean, both Gary and I really wouldn't have been able to do what we do without them. You know, Gary's early days, you know, Dad was there, you know, as I said earlier, he'd load all the gear in out the van and, you know, do all that sort of stuff. They were always there. For all the sort of tour, you know, big touring years and that, you know, Dad was managing and running that side. Mum was doing backstage, fan club, you know, keeping our white clothes white and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, I don't think you could ever actually work out just how much they've contributed because without a tiny bit of what they've done, it wouldn't have happened. But they did a huge amount. You know, you could almost say they sacrificed some of their life, really, for Gary's career. And they're just brilliant parents. You know, they were always there, always supportive, and I just can't imagine, them not being there really. Dad's still here. Dad's still as supportive now as he's ever been. He doesn't go out on the road and stuff anymore, but he comes to gigs and things and all that sort of stuff. So they're still supportive. And we couldn't have done what we've done. But not just music, but even the flying and other things that Gary and I have done over the years. Mum and Dad have always been sort of instrumental or part of it. It's never been it was always Mum's idea. With the touring that we were always together. That was Mum was sort of behind that. To keep the family together, sort of thing.
Nice. Well, thank you for that. And just finally, then, what are your next plans music-wise? Do you already have like a new album in mind? Is that what the next plan is?
Yes. I mean, hopefully some more gigs, later this year and next year, hopefully. But I've started writing what will be the next album. Got about 5 songs, sort of demo written, sort of thing, so half written. So I'm just working on ideas for that. Really, it'll be a bit different from Alpha. There'll be a little bit more sort of spoken word and stuff in it, and a bit more storytelling, that sort of thing. But it'd be the same sort of vein, but just taking it a little bit different. And they're probably some of the songs will probably be a bit sort of shorter and more punchier, more because I'm thinking of playing them live, really. So it's more sort of like live type of songs rather than album.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for all of that, Donovan. It was awesome talking to you and just hearing about your story. And thank you for being on Electric Friends.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
That was Donovan Silver. It was so amazing to speak to him at such length. He was such a lovely person and so generous with his time. You should definitely check out his music at donovansilver.co.uk. And I'm sorry again for not asking a lot of your questions. As I said in the chat with him, when I was looking back at them, I realised that pretty much all of them have been spoken about already. So, but thanks so much as ever for sending them in. Let me know who else you'd like me to speak to. You can reach me at newmanpodcast@gmail.com, or you can get in touch via socials at Newman Podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok. The video version of this will also go up on YouTube soon, where you can also check out past episodes on there too. So Gary has been out on an awesome looking tour of the States with Ministry, judging from his recent posts and fan comments, so please let me know if you've attended any of those and what it was like. And very soon, of course, Gary will be returning to the UK for his Replicas and Pleasure Principle 45th anniversary tour, which I can't wait for. I'll actually be heading out to a few of those to hand out cards about the podcast, so if you happen to see me and have been enjoying the show, then please let me know and say hi. But for now, I hope you're all good, and thanks again for listening. I'll be back next time for another episode, but for now, see you soon.
Friends, a Gary Numan podcast celebrating the tracks by a musical pioneer.